还有一个问题，我想问一下，就是我们有传言听说会用这个代言费的一部分拿出来投资比亚迪的股票，这是真的吗？
这个是真的，这个是真的。
真的。
那我也可以说这个传言是怎么样啊？10年前呢，我就做了一档节目啊，那个是比亚迪的冠名赞助啊。你看，如果当年投资了，现在多少倍了？
多少辆腾势就
这个大概有在
10
年前到现在，起码都是5倍了。所以这次不会那么蠢了，这次绝对会把握好机会了。尤其是跟腾势跟比亚迪整个的团队比较深度的了解，我们不但是志同道合的，但是我真的是很佩服这个公司。所以这个也是我觉得应该的，对，也是。到时候10年后你问我，我应该会很满意这个决定。
感谢力宏，我觉得力宏跟我们比亚迪、跟我们腾势是
应该不用10年了，
奔赴是吧？
明年问我应该已经很满意了。
作词演18般乐器，样样精通，信手拈来，是公认的全能音乐人。与我们腾势 N9一样，18般武艺，从容驾驭。让我们用热烈的掌声，有请腾势汽车品牌全球代言人、华语乐坛巨星王力宏先生。
在那边落花似雪，纷纷绵绵，谁人念？看流边风吹雪面，生生世世随人愿。可怜的吧，不把爱念吧，留念。在那边落花似雪，纷纷绵绵，谁人念？看流边风吹雪面，生生世世随人愿。千年的等待，滋味酸酸楚楚两人缘。不然今生我眷恋，日日年年为情切。
18般武艺，从容驾驭腾势 N9 闪冲版科技驾控旗舰 SUV。
此刻，让我们一同迎接为从容而生的旗舰座驾——全新腾势 N9 闪冲版耀目登场。以旗舰赴约，与从容同行，有请王力宏先生。
大家好，我是王力宏。一上台就被大家的热情深深的感染了。今天能够跟你们相聚在这里，非常的开心，非常的感恩，谢谢你们。今天我很荣幸以腾势汽车品牌全球代言人的身份站在这里。刚才听到汇总的一个分享，我的感触很深。看到腾势一路走来的这个突破、成长，也让我想起了自己的音乐道路。从小到大，音乐始终是我生命里最亲密的一个伙伴。怀着对音乐的热爱，我就读了威廉姆斯大学、伯克利音乐学院，追寻梦想，开启了我的音乐人生。这些年来啊，我始终相信一句话，就是原创是音乐人的生命。跟风或许能走得快，模仿或许能一时被看见，但只有原创才能真正留下来，真正走远。从我的第一张专辑1995年了，情敌贝多芬，到公传自传，再到首次担任独立制作人的2000年的《永远的第一天》，哇！我始终坚持用原创的态度面对每一首歌、每一张专辑。可以说，没有对原创的坚持，就不会有今天的王力宏。而在坚持原创的同时，我也一直在思考，华语音乐怎么样才可以真正走向世界。因此2004年我去了云南、西藏、新疆，还有很多地方采风少数民族音乐，也更加深刻地意识到中华文化是世界上独一无二的宝藏。每一种民族乐器都有它无法复制的灵魂，每一段旋律背后都承载了属于中华文化的生命力。后来我把民乐、京剧、昆曲与西方音乐做了融合，创造了 Chinked Out， 就是华人嘻哈这个风格。我想打造的是不只是一个曲风而已啊，是一种属于中国流行音乐的声音，一种华流的听觉身份。我希望全世界不仅听到华语音乐，更能够透过音乐看见今天蓬勃发展、充满创造力的中国文化。而这些探索也让我创作出了《心中的日月》、《盖世英雄》、《在梅边》、《天地龙鳞》等作品。大家都听过吗？谢谢大家。其实这些年来啊，我越来越深刻地感受到，真正能够改变世界的不只是文化，还有科技。所以我一直尝试把新的科技融入到音乐创作与演出，去探索更丰富、更震撼的作品。科技让音乐拥有了更多的可能，但是音乐让科技拥有了生命力。前不久，比亚迪第2代刀片电池和闪充技术发布会的时候，很多的朋友问我，你是不是要去现场唱改变自己？我这不就来了吗？而且当我真正的深入了解到第2代刀片电池长续航和急速闪充这个背后的技术，我真的非常非常的佩服。因为这不只是参数上的一个领先，而是真正改变生活方式的一个力量，让它出行更自由，时间更从容。而腾势也正在用不断创新的技术， 创新的科技，去创造一种更美好的生活方式。这种不断的突破、不断的向上的精神，也深深打动了我。我一直相信，一个时代真正的崛起，一定同时伴随着文化与科技的崛起。今天从华流音乐到中国汽车，从舞台的灯到道路上的新能源，中国原创的力量正在被全世界看见。而我也特别的开心，告诉大家，后天就是5月20号，我的新歌《Come On May》正式即将上线。还有下星期全新一轮，对，没错，全新的世界巡回演唱会《最好的地方2》即将启动。谢谢。这次我也希望可以把更多中国原创的音乐、更多中国科技、更多属于这个时代的中国力量带向更大的世界舞台。因为无论是音乐还是科技，真正伟大的创作都不是追随着世界，而是改变世界。最后，我要祝愿腾势汽车带着科技豪华的初心，在世界舞台稳步前行，腾势而上。也祝愿所有在场的朋友们，祝愿你们都能够守住心中的热爱，在人生的道路上奔赴最好的地方。谢谢大家。
感谢王力宏先生的分享，请您留步。一份旗舰礼遇理应献给懂得从容的人。接下来，让我们再次有请汇总上台，为王力宏先生交付这副专属的旗舰礼遇。
我们这个很大的，汇总好，汇
力
总
宏啊，
谢谢。
谢谢力宏的分享啊，非常的开心。
谢谢汇总，我也非常荣幸。
来到我们发布会的现场，
真的非常的荣幸，今天好震撼啊，而且还在直播啊。
对，
好多观众好多观众朋友在现场。
力宏应该也深度体验过了我们的腾势 N9。
当然，
今天呢，我就想替广大的粉丝啊，还有我们的网友们来问一问，腾势 N9闪充版最好的地方是什么？
最好的地方，我觉得最好的地方是腾势 N9的原创设计，整体气质是非常的戳中我啊！第一眼我就觉得很豪华，很容易就能够识别出它的设计。
是的，原创设计呢，才是豪华的最高级的表达。腾势 N9开起来感觉怎么样？
腾势 N9这么大一个车子，但是很好开，很好停，
是的，
驾控非常好，出行很从容，安全性也很出色，而且还可以圆规这个掉头，这个是很神奇啊，非常有科技感的。
是的，力宏，你刚刚说的这些呢，也是深受我们腾势用户好评的地方。并且呢，力宏这一次啊，还专门为腾势 N9的帝瓦雷音响特调了一种新的音效，
没错，
叫做气势如虹。
对，这个模式非常适合大家可以坐在里面听的时候，比如说天地龙鳞这样的歌，能够把很多的层次啊、气氛都完美的呈现出来。大家一定要亲自去试试看，好不好？好，
一定要试一下啊！我呢也推荐大家能够亲自去感受一下，质感呢特别的棒。刚刚力宏登台前呢那一段啊，我们的这个宣传片也是力宏和我们腾势一起共创的。
对
啊，并且呢还亲自编曲，效果非常的惊艳。
大家刚听到了吗？
对，一起听了。
首播嘛。对。 就是那个音乐，我用了中国风的一些元素啊，古筝啊，还有很多传统的一些乐器，还有昆曲啊，而且还有一个小彩蛋，不知道大家有没有发现，这个舞蹈的部分呢、就是最好的地方。2演唱会舞蹈让大家抢先看了，希望大家喜欢。
前2天呢，腾势也迎来了品牌换新4周年这样的一个特别的日子。我在这里呢也非常的荣幸邀请王力宏先生成为我们腾势汽车第50万辆车的车主。
哇！
我们一起来跨越这个历史性的
谢谢。
感谢汇总，恭喜王力宏先生成为腾势汽车第50万辆车主。
50万辆！
愿腾势 N9 闪充版这台集豪华、闪充、驾控、安全、智慧于一体的旗舰座驾，陪伴腾势用户的每一段从容旅途。谢谢2位，
谢谢。
我们也知道呢，力宏呢一直是投身公益事业，并且是亲力亲为。其实我们腾势用户啊，这么多年呢，也一直坚持在践行这个公益善举，并且是连续4年，
是的，
走进了四川的大凉山，我们进行了慈善捐助。今天呢，有一份非常特别的礼物，就是这幅画。这幅画呢，是由四川大凉山的小朋友们呢，他是亲自画的，代表了小朋友们的心意。送给你，
谢谢。
希望你能继续用音乐为世界带来力量。
他们都是我们的孩子，我看一下。
那你看看，哇，这
还有个小爱心，
绿色的地球，
笑脸，
这是音乐，上面还有个笑脸
啊，很可爱，特别治愈啊。大家看得到啊？谢谢汇总，这个是很有意义的，这个很有意义。我也带了一个小礼物送给您了，这个就是我们最好的地方2的吉祥物，它叫做娜娜。娜娜呢是我们这个新的巡回演唱会，代表着源源不断的美好能量，希望可以送给腾势汽车。
谢谢力宏，
谢谢。
娜娜，势能满满的小精灵哦，寓意非常的好。好，我们一起来合个影。
请2位一起看一下我们的前方，定格这个美好的时刻。
再次感谢力宏，也提前预祝你的演唱会圆满顺利。
谢谢汇总，谢谢。
好，谢谢力宏给大家的祝福，也请力宏稍作休息。
好。
Hello。谢谢。Hi, thank you.
Thank you, Polina. Thank you, Jun. Thank you, Pei Shan, for helping to set this up. Thank you all for being here today. And the latecomers as well. Thank you for coming in quietly. I want to start off today just to take a moment of silence for the victims of the Sichuan earthquake, and also for the victims of the Boston Marathon bombing. So let's just take a minute to pay our respects to them. Thank you. I never thought I would be addressing you, the esteemed members of the Oxford Union, without a guitar or an erhu, without my crazy stage hair, costumes. But I did perform at the O2 Arena in London last week. I'm not sure if any of you were able to make that, but in many ways that was similar to what I'm talking about today. That is, introducing Chinese pop music to you. See, I'm actually an ambassador for Chinese pop, whether I like it or not, both music and movies. And today, I'm here to give you the State of the Union address. It's not the Oxford Union, it's the Union of East and West.
I want to frankly, openly, and honestly talk about how we've done a good job or how we've done a bad job of bringing Chinese pop to the West. And I also want to impress upon all of you here today the importance of that soft culture, that soft power exchange, and how each of us is involved in that exchange. Soft power, a term I'm sure you're all familiar with at this point, coined by Rhodes scholar and Oxford alum Joseph Nye, is defined as the ability to attract and persuade. Shashi Tharoor called it in a recent TED Talk, the ability for a culture to tell a compelling story and to influence others to fall in love with it. I like that definition. But I want to put it in collegiate terms for all you students in the audience. The way I see it, East and West are kind of like freshman roommates. You don't know a lot about each other, but suddenly you're living together in the same room. And each one is scared that the other is going to steal its shower time or wants to party when the other one wants to study. It has the potential to be absolute hell, doesn't it? We've all had horror stories of that roommate. We've all heard about those stories. I know a lot of students here at Oxford have your own separate bedrooms. But when I was a freshman at Williams College, I was not so fortunate. You're kidding me. Woohoo! All right, great. Well, I had a roommate, and he was that roommate. Let's just call him Frank. So Frank was my roommate, and Frank liked nothing more than to smoke weed. And he did it every day. And Frank had a 2-foot-long bong under his bed that was constantly being fired up. For those Chinese speakers in the audience, Frank would hold 一拳开 on that bong every day. All right. So I guess I was kind of the opposite of Bill Clinton, who tried marijuana but didn't inhale. See, I didn't try marijuana, but I did inhale. Every single day. Secondhand. And strangely enough, every time I'd go into our bedroom, I'd mysteriously end up late for class. I don't know how that happened. It was like, dude, is it already 10 o'clock? So, how many of you have lived with a Frank? Or could be a Frankette? Having a roommate can be a recipe for disaster, but it also has the potential for being the greatest friendship you've ever had. See, Frank, he didn't make it to second year. And I got 2 new roommates second year, Stefan and Jason. And to this day, the 3 of us are the best of friends. So going back to my analogy of East and West, as roommates, do we want to be Frank or do we want to be Stefan and Jason? And I think in this day and age, in 2013, we should all be striving for the latter, shouldn't we? I mean, I'm assuming that we all agree that this is the goal we should all be striving for. Now let's look at where we are in reality. Recent headlines in the media include Foreign Policy magazine. China's victim complex. Why are Chinese leaders so paranoid about the United States? Or the AFP, the Agence France Presse. Human rights in China worsening, US finds. Bloomberg says, on the cover of this magazine, yes, the Chinese army is spying on you. And it's such a great one that I just wanted to show you the cover of the magazine. All right. Yes. Be very afraid. Okay. Was I showing that to you right? Okay. So there's actually an extremely high amount of negativity, fear, and anxiety about China, Sinophobia, that I think is not just misinformed, but also misleading and ultimately dangerous, very dangerous. And what about how Westerners are viewed by Chinese? Well, we have terms for Westerners, the most common of which are guai lo in Cantonese, which means the old devil, lao wai, meaning the old outsider in Mandarin, ang mo, which means the red-haired one in Taiwanese. The list goes on and on. So, are these roommates headed for a best friend relationship? I think we need a little help. And as China rises to be a global power, I think it's more important than ever for us to be discerning about what we believe, because after all, I think that's the purpose of higher education. And that's why we're all here, to be able to think for ourselves and make our own decisions. China is not just those headlines, the burgeoning economy or the unique politics. It's not just the world's factory or the next big superpower. It's so much more. 1 billion people with rich culture, amazing stories, and as a product of both of those cultures, I want to help foster understanding between the two and help create that incredible relationship. Because knowing both sides of the coin, I really think that there is a love story waiting to be told, waiting to unfold. And I'm only half joking when I say love story, because I believe it is the stories that will save us, will bring us together. And my thesis statement for today's talk is that the relationship between the East and West needs to be and can be fixed via pop culture. That's a big fat claim, and I'm going to try and back it up. Now, the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon said, "There are no languages required in the musical world. That is the power of music. That is the power of the heart. Through this promotion of arts, we can better understand the culture and civilizations of other people. In this era of instability and intolerance, we need to promote better understanding through the power of music." Now, the UN Secretary General thinks we need more music, and I think he's right. Music and arts have always played a key role in my life in building relationships, replacing what once was ignorance, fear, and hatred with acceptance, friendship, and even love. So I have a strong case for promoting music between cultures because it happened to me early in life. I was born and raised in Rochester, New York. I barely spoke a word of Chinese. I didn't know the difference between Taiwan or Thailand. It's true. I was as American as apple pie. Until one day, on the 3rd grade playground, the inevitable finally happened. I got teased for being Chinese. Now, every kid gets teased or made fun of on the playground, but this was fundamentally different, and I knew it right then and there. This kid, let's call him Brian McElroy. He started making fun of me, saying, "Chinese, Japanese, dirty knees, look at these." I can't believe you're laughing at that. That hurts. Okay, I'm just kidding. I can still remember how I felt. I felt ashamed. I felt embarrassed. But I laughed along with him, with everyone. And I didn't know what else to do. It was like having an out-of-body experience, as if I could laugh at that Chinese kid on the playground with all the other Americans because I was one of them. Right? Wrong. On many levels. And I was facing, for the first, but definitely not the last time, the harsh reality that I was a minority in Rochester, which in those days had an Asian population of 1%. And I was confused. I wanted to punch Brian. I wanted to hurt him for putting me in that situation. But he was faster than me, and he was stronger than me, and he would have kicked my butt, and we both knew that. So I just took it in. And I didn't tell anyone or share with anyone these feelings. I just held them in, and I let them fester. And those feelings would surface in a strangely therapeutic way for me through music. And it was no coincidence that around that time, I started getting good at the violin and the guitar and the drums. And I would soon discover that by playing music or singing, other kids would, for a brief moment, forget about my race or color and accept me, and then be able to see me for who I truly am. A human being who's emotional, spiritual, curious about the world, and has a need for love just like everyone else. And by the 6th grade, guess who asked me if I would be the drummer for his band? Brian McElroy. And I said yes. And that's when we together formed our elementary school rock band called Nirvana. I'm not kidding. I was in a rock band called Nirvana before Kurt Cobain's Nirvana was ever known. So when Nirvana came out, Brian and I were like, hey, he's stealing our name. But really what attracted me to music at this young age was just this, and it's still what I love about music, is that it breaks down the walls between us and shows us so quickly the truth that we are much more alike than we are different. And then in high school, I learned that music wasn't just about connecting with others. like Brian and I were connected through music. It was a powerful tool of influence and inspiration. Sam Nguyen was my high school janitor. He was an immigrant from Vietnam who barely spoke a word of English. Sam swept the floors and cleaned the bathrooms at our school for 20 years. And he never talked to the kids, and the kids never talked to Sam. But one day, before the opening night of our school's annual musical, he walked up to me holding a letter. And I was taken aback. I was thinking, why is Sam the janitor approaching me? And he gave me this letter that I've kept to this day. It was scrawled in a shaky hand, written in all capitals, and it read, "In all my years of working as a janitor at Sutherland, you're the first Asian boy to play the lead role. I'm going to bring my 6-year-old daughter to watch you perform tonight because I want her to see that Asians can be inspiring." And that letter just floored me. I was 15 years old and I was absolutely stunned. That's the first time I realized how music was so important. With Brian, music helped two kids who were initially enemies become friends. But with Sam, music went beyond the one-on-one. It was an even higher level. It influenced others I didn't even know in ways I could never imagine. I can't tell you how grateful I am to Sam the janitor to this day. He really is one of the people who helped me discover my life's purpose. And I had no idea that something I did could mean more than I ever imagined to an immigrant from Vietnam who barely even spoke English. Pop culture, music, and the other methods of storytelling, movies, TV dramas, they are so key, and they do connect us, like me and Brian, and do influence us and inspire us. Then let's take another look at the State of the Union, the East-West Union with this soft power bias. How is the soft power exchange between these two roommates? Are there songs in English that have become hits in China? For sure. How about movies? Well, there are so many that China has had to limit the number of Hollywood movies imported into the country so that local films can even have a chance at success. What about the flip side of that? The Chinese songs that have hit in the West? Well, yeah. And movies. Well, there was Crouching Tiger. That was 13 years ago. And, well, I think there's a bit of an imbalance here. And I think it's a soft power deficit, let's call it that, when we look in this direction. That is to say, the West influences the East more than vice versa. And forgive me for using the East and West kind of loosely, but I think it's a lot easier to say this than the English-speaking language or the Asian-speaking language or the Chinese, or getting into specifics. I think I'm making generalizations, and I hope you can go with me on this. And is this intrinsically a problem, this imbalance in pop cultural influence? And I think so. I think in any healthy relationship or friendship or marriage, isn't it important for both sides to make an effort to understand the other, and that this exchange needs to have a healthy balance? And how do we address this? As an ambassador for Chinese pop music and movies, I have to ask myself the question, why does this deficit exist? Is it because Chinese music just is lame? And don't answer that, please. Yeah, I can just see someone being like, "Stop complaining and write a hit song. Psy did it," But actually, there's truth in that. And the argument being that the content we've created just isn't as internationally competitive. And why should it be? Well, look at Korean pop. Look at K-pop, for example. Korea is an export-based economy, and they're outward-looking, and they must be outward-looking. Chinese pop, on the other hand, can just kind of stay domestic, tour all over China-speaking territories, and comfortably sustain. So when you're that big and powerful, there are over 160 cities in China with 1 million or more people. You tend to kind of turn inward and be complacent. So there certainly can be an argument made for Chinese pop being not marketed with international sensibilities in mind. But the other side of the argument, I think, is more interesting and thought-provoking and even more true, that Western ears aren't familiar with and therefore don't really understand how to appreciate Chinese music. Ouch. Okay. The reason I think that argument holds water, though, is because that's exactly what I went through. So I happen to know a thing or two about learning to appreciate Chinese pop as a Westerner. Because I was 17 years old when I went from being an Asian kid in America to being an American kid in Asia. And the entire paradigm suddenly got flipped on its head. I grew up listening to the Beastie Boys, Led Zeppelin, Guns N' Roses, and I found myself in Taiwan listening to the radio and thinking, where's the beat? Where are the screeching guitar solos? So here I am, this American kid in Asia, listening to Chinese music for the first time and thinking, this stuff is lame. I don't like it. I thought it was cheesy. Production value was low. The singers couldn't belt like Axl Rose or Mariah Carey. But then one day, I went to my first Chinese pop concert, and it was Yu Chenqing, Harlem U. Yeah, performing in the Taipei Shejiaoguan, the Taipei Music Center. And as he performed, I looked around at the audience, and I saw their faces, and the look in their eyes, the responsiveness to his music. And it was clear to me, finally, where the problem lay. It wasn't that the music was lacking, it was my ability to appreciate it and to hear it in the right way. The crowd, they would sing along and be totally immersed in his music, and I had this epiphany that I was missing the point, and from now on, I was going to somehow learn how to get it. I was going to learn how to hear with local ears, and I deconstructed and analyzed what it was that made Chinese audiences connect with certain types of melodies and rhythms and song structures and lyrics, and that's what I've been doing for the past almost 20 years. And it took me a long time, and I'm still learning, but at some point, I not only began to be able to appreciate the music, but I started being able to contribute to it and create my own fresh spins on the tried and true. And I think this happens to everyone, really, who's on the outside looking in. It always looks strange. If you look at things from your perspective, you're always going to think that these people are weirdos. What's wrong with them? Why are they listening to this stuff? And I'm saying that you can make an effort and get it. It can be done, and I'm living proof of that. And as an ambassador of Chinese pop, I'm trying to get people to open up to a sound that they may not feel is palatable at the first listen. So what else can we do to reduce this imbalance in our popular cultures? Well, maybe give a talk at the Oxford Union. Tour more outside of China. But seriously, actually, I think the tides are already starting to change. Very slowly, very cautiously, almost calculatingly. You see more cross-cultural exchange now, more interest in China, definitely. A lot of joint ventures, a lot of co-productions in recent years. Iron Man 3, Transformers 53, Resident Evil, really, it's beginning to be kind of like a world pop. And that's what I'm looking forward to, and that's what I'm focusing on these days. There was J-pop, there was K-pop, there was C-pop, and there's like this W-pop that's kind of starting to emerge, this world pop. And I think, yeah, I love that idea, that it's not world music. It's not like, there used to be a section in HMV called world music. That was like ethnomusicology class in college. No, but world pop is more about breaking and tearing down age-old stereotypes, the artificial confines that have kept us apart for way too long. It's a melting pot and it's a mosaic that even when we look up close, we'll still see the colors and the flavors of each culture in detail. And where can we go to listen to world pop? I don't think there's a world pop station or a magazine, unfortunately. There are none, there should be. But there is the internet, and YouTube has proven to be a driving force of world pop. Britain's Got Talent made Susan Boyle the hottest act in the world, and she achieved that not through the record labels or the networks, but through grassroots sharing. Gangnam Style is another great example of how that just took over and became a huge worldwide world pop phenomenon. So world pop also suggests a worldwide pop culture and something that can be shared by all of us and give us a lot of common ground. So today, what's my call to action? I want to help improve and promote the cultural exchange between the East and West, and I think I've made that clear, but how? I think you can all become pop singers, really. I think that's the answer. No, I'm just kidding. Unless that's what you really want to do. My call to action is this. Build and protect that roommate relationship between the East and West. Value this relationship and take ownership of it. Don't come to Oxford as an exchange student from Taiwan and only hang out with other Chinese students. Why would you do that? You could do that back in Wuhan or Nanjing or wherever you came from. Don't buy into the headlines or the stereotypes or into the hyper-nationalism. Think for yourselves. And this goes for the East and the West, both. Get to know one another and think for yourselves and don't believe the hype. For a moment, if we could just disregard the government and what the media is saying, just for the sake of argument, with our own tools of critical thinking, can we build relationships that actually see one another as individual human beings and not faceless members of a particular ethnicity or nationality? Of course we can do that. And that's the goal and dream, I think, of the romantic artist and the musician. I think it's always been that. And that's what I wish for. And that's what makes music and art so powerful and so true. It breaks down instantly, disintegrates all the artificial barriers that we've created between each other, government, nationality, black, brown, yellow, white, whatever color you are, and shows each other our hearts, our fears, our hopes, and our dreams. And it turns out, in the end, that the East isn't that far after all. And the West, well, the West ain't so wild. And through understanding each other's popular cultures, we gain insight into each other's hearts and true selves. And for those of you who are just beginning that journey to the West and East, I want to invite you today on this amazing journey with me. And I, as an experienced traveler on this road, on the West to East road, I prepared a mixtape for all of you today of 10 songs that I love. Here they are. That's a C-pop mixtape that you can check out. I was going to burn you all CDs, but my publicist reminded me lovingly that that would be illegal. So, and because I'm a professional recording artist, I shouldn't do that. But actually the link works out nicely because you get to see the music videos as well on a lot of these songs. And these guys, these 10 songs are songs that I love, and 10 different Chinese artists to start you off on getting to know and love Chinese pop. And I think these guys are awesome, and I hope you do too. And I just want to wrap up saying that being here in the Oxford campus really makes me nostalgic for my days at Williams. And when I look back on those 4 years, some of my fondest memories are spending time with my roommates, Stefan Papiano and Jason Price. And in fact, Jason is here in the audience today and made this special trip from London just to see me. And I suppose in the beginning we were strangers who didn't know much about the other. And sometimes we did compete for the shower, and there were times when we did intrude on each other's privacy. But I always loved listening to Stefan's stories about growing up in a Greek family and his opinions on what authentic Greek food really was. Or Jason's stories about wanting to make violins and to live in Cremona, Italy, like Antonio Stradivari. And he did do that. And I'll never forget, many years later, when I played a Jason Price handmade violin for the first time, and how that felt. They were always attentive and respectful when I'd tell them about what it was like for me growing up in a Chinese household with strict parents who made me study. So we shared stories, but the strongest bonds between us were formed just sitting around and listening to music together. And I really do see that as a model for East and West. So that's why I want to share Chinese music with you today, because it's the best way I know how to create the lasting friendships that transcend all barriers and allow us to know each other truly authentically, and just as we are. Thank you.